Hey guys, GWS here. Here to do something interesting. Yeah, I've been out of the political spectrum for a while, but I just figured, this thing is so in depth that I have to cover it. So, what is this? This is basically a very advanced version of a political spectrum with many, many different issues. Not just many, many different issues, but many different spectral analyses, because it's like, of course, you have your statism, minarchism, which is libertarianism basically, and then you got left and right wing. Left wing being like secular and all that, but they also have these others here too on the left, and you'll see these like authoritarian versus liberal. Then you got nativist versus cosmopolitan. Then you got modernist versus traditionalist. And then over here you got deregulation versus regulation. Privatization versus nationalization. Low spending versus high spending. So you got a lot of different spectral analyses here. So we're going to find out where I fall along this. And I've done a little bit of preparation for this. So our sovereign unit's going to be country. Our region autonomy. I believe in high autonomy, not total. You gotta have a central government, but it needs to be small and basic. Governing class, anyone, labor union, STEM, military officials, corporate, or clerics. We're gonna go with anyone. That's democracy. Executive, basically your president. You got a group, you got an individual, and if it'll select it. And as you can see here, this is direct vote. I think this means that the people decide. So let's see. It won't let me select direct vote. So we'll just click elected there. Legislative, appointed. Nope, we want elected legislators. Judicial branch. I do believe in appointed judiciary because they should be separated from politics. It's one of the few things that should be. Meaning, like, if you had an elected judiciary, like, that is going to influence how they enforce the laws rather than their personal interpretation of the law. And you want an independent judiciary from the political system who will interpret the laws based on their judicial philosophies. Voting requirements, age, education, landowner, ethnicity. There's an argument to be made for education and landowners, but when you start sectioning people off, laws often start going against those people you're omitting. So that's pretty much why, for nearly all except for age and perhaps felons, perhaps not felons, like voting should not be restricted. Religion, of course, I personally am a Christian, but I don't believe in a state religion. Military funding, I believe it should be low, but the spending right now is about 18% of GDP. I believe we should lower military spending, but I do believe in a strong military. So we're going to raise that to 15. 10 is just a little bit too low. Foreign policy, we're going to be neutral. I don't want to be isolationist because you got national interests that you have to fight for. But that basically, neutral just says, like, we're not going to intervene, but we're going to protect our interests, which is what I believe is correct. Military service, I actually would like some form of conscription, at least in the United States. Um, Now, here's where it gets sketchy because you don't really have, um, like, I'm not entirely sure what a good immigration limit is. And I don't believe in, I don't know, it's hard to believe in quotas because it's like, first of all, students should not be immigrants, so we're going to put that to 0. I don't believe in refugees being able to bypass the immigration. Now, there is something for a small number of asylum seekers, but it should be only in extreme cases, so we're going to raise that up to 5%, or we're going to lower it to 5%, and then 95% will be there. Now, this, I'm not 100% sure on, like, what level of immigration will be acceptable. Like, I'd say, if you're looking at it from, like, if you had to put an absolute cap on it, I'd definitely put it above what they're putting here. Yeah, I'd say probably your maximum should be more like 2%. So we'll go with that. And entry requirements, language and education, which is good, because they should, and yeah, they should have equal rights. Benefits is a little bit debatable because we'll look at those results later. We're not gonna. I didn't see it, but some of you probably saw it. So I think we'll just leave it equal rights as opposed to equal rights with benefits. Just because, you know, you don't want that to be an incentive, like, at least until they get citizenship. If they get citizenship, then they're really not so much of an immigrant. Okay, so let's go down to law enforcement. Well, wait a minute, we still got, okay, we got this down here. Okay, regulations. Oh, the key thing. Okay, so we got air and land. You do have to limit water pollution. So we're actually gonna put that in there. Women's rights, wage discrimination, maternity leave. I don't think anti-discrimination laws are helpful to women in particular because it just discourages them from being hired. It doesn't fix the problem. Minimum wage, of course. There's a school of thought where, like, you don't really want a minimum wage. You kind of want a minimum standard, but like, if you're going to have a minimum wage, you have to adjust it for inflation. Like, it makes no sense not to. And of course, you got to make it universal, because whatever you're making the minimum wage, excuse me, whatever you're making the minimum wage, you know, it has to scale with the economy. Okay, so pensions, this is basically your Social Security, and we do not want to force people on pensions, either employer or employee. That's based on the contract. And of course, we lowered the inheritance tax to 0 because, let's face it, inheritance tax is basically theft, and it is wrong for the government to feel like they can step in between like a son and their father and his decided inheritance and his will. If he doesn't include the government in his will, he has the right not to. Central bank. And this is another one where it's debatable. I don't like the idea of a central bank, but I don't see how you could have stable financing for what the country does need. You know, whatever your level of government, whether you're libertarian, you're a moderate or you're an extreme liberal. It's like if you don't have a central bank, it's a lot more challenging to get the financing that you need and maintain, especially with the government. But I believe that it has to be publicly owned. Like, I don't like the idea of a privately owned central bank set up with special rules being too big to fail. To me, it's just counter. Like, if you have, I don't, I'm not a big believer in nationalization, and you'll see that as we go through. But if you're gonna have something that is necessary to the operation of the country, just nationalize it. But we're not going to have any. You can look at the things here like QE. Like you can look at these definitions here. A central bank can buy government securities to increase the money supply. Or of course you can have the discount window, which is the central bank can lend money to financial institutions at a discount to increase liquidity, you know, or you can have the central bank can buy or sell foreign currency in exchange for the domestic currency to influence the exchange rate. I don't like either one of those because I don't like artificial manipulation of currency unless it's like extreme prevention of hyperinflation. And I believe in a small cash reserve ratio, not a huge one, but like just enough to where there's something available there, but not enough where you can give the central bank the excuse to lend out all these gobs of money. Like, that shouldn't be there. Now, see, this is going to be interesting here because this spending, like, once again, this is one of those arbitrary things. So we're going to have to collapse some of these so we can see our budget. And that's going to be important because right now we're 1.8% of GDP in the red. And so, you know, we want to see how much these things are actually going to cost. So if you go here, like you see 1.6 to 1.9 once you go to 100%. Now, that kind of a difference is very, very small, and in fact, yeah, so, you know, we'll go ahead and spend 100% on that. Same thing with the parks. Like, if they're going to cost that little, you know, why not just throw a little bit into the public parks? Now, conservation is a little more pricey. I'd probably keep that at the 75% because you do want to preserve your country's natural assets. So we're at 75%. Solar energy and nuclear energy. Sorry, you're on your. I don't believe in energy subsidies at all. Science, I think you can go to 12.5. It does cost a lot in GDP to fund science, according to this, but like you gotta have, you know, like it's important for the government to at least give some small amount to advancement. Yeah, especially like, you know, because I guess the one thing a government can do an okay job at least as far as governments are concerned, is at least providing a general source of funding toward secondary entities that maybe the private sector won't always catch on to. Because a lot of times, like the private sector will be focused on certain very specific areas and they'll miss opportunities. And it's like sometimes, not even usually, but there's room for a little bit of investment, public investment in the sciences as opposed to the private investment, which the private investment is almost always better. But again, there's just some little things that the government can find that can help, and yeah, there's that. Poverty fund. Now we're going to decrease these because I actually have something I believe in here. So, you know, we're not going to fund pensions and stuff, but we are going to fund a universal basic income. Um, and see, there's actually two versions of it, which I like. This is a minimum income. This is funding for people that earn below a minimum wage threshold. Now, this one's a little bit confusing. I'm assuming this is talking about annual. But this also says wage, and wage is hourly or daily earnings, and it's just like, it really should say annual here. And there's just a big debate, because I believe in the universal income, but there's two schools of thought. One school of thought is you just give a basic flat income from the government to every single individual in the country. The strength of such a thing is such a thing because it's universal. You would not have much bureaucracy behind it. Like, every single person just gets that money. Um, you know, the weakness of that is because you're funding every single person, it is an absolute beast of a program to fund. It's like, I've run the calculations actually for the US, and it would be so expensive. We're talking like giving every single person $700 would basically double the budget, even if you got rid of all, like Medicare, Medicaid, all the other poverty programs, etc., and replaced it with that. Now, what I'm more sympathetic to is the minimum income. The minimum income is where, instead of saying everybody gets, you say everybody gets it below this certain threshold. And of course, the strength of that is it costs far, far less. Like, you're talking, like, if you fund it, say, at the, you know, 50% threshold, you're talking you can give each person, a good $500 to $700, and you wouldn't lose any money. Of course, you got a little bit of bureaucracy behind it, but I'm kind of more sympathetic toward that. But you know, then I was actually kind of thinking when I was doing this, like, what if we did a combination? Because see, the cool thing about universal income too is that you get it even if you get a job. Like, if you get this, if you get a job that puts you over the income threshold, it's okay. You keep your money regardless, so you're not discouraged from working. With the minimum income, there may, like, if you're near the boundary already, it may discourage some people from seeking work and seeking to be productive. And so it's like, I kind of wonder, what about a combination of the two? That's what I was thinking. And it's like, if, at least according to this, I'm not sure, I haven't tested the accuracy of all the numbers here, but if you go 2020, and actually, if we go 22.5, we'll do that, and we'll see where we're at once we do our taxes. We may have to lower this, but if you go 22.5, 22.5, which is where we'll leave it for now, we're 0.9% in the red, and it's like, I think you could be healthy even if you were like 5 to 7% in the red, because you can account for GDP growth, and you can account for GDP growth, and you can account for just a small amount of accumulated debt. That you don't have to address it immediately, and when you do address it, you can do so in a focused way. So there's all the government stuff. Now let's look at law enforcement. This is where it kind of starts to get fun. So here's general crime. So first of all, what do we get for murder? Death. That is exactly what's going to happen. Child abuse, jail time, defamation, unrestricted. Sorry, I'm a free speech believer. I don't believe in defamation of character lawsuits. Okay, so rape, life. Incitement, unrestricted. There's a school of thought where you could even do fines for that, but it's like, according to this definition, acts or production that promote unlawful behavior or violence. As long as you're not directly telling people to do something, then there's nothing wrong with it. War crime, death penalty, agreed. Street prostitution, unrestricted. Brothels, unrestricted. Escorts, unrestricted. I don't believe in, like, personally, I think those are disgusting things. As someone who loves God, it's like, you know, you ruin lives, but I don't think it does us any good legally. This is where I'm going to start moving to the right a little bit, like the gun control stuff. Handguns, unrestricted, just because it's like, it's so easy to get a handgun. What's the point of doing background checks? Shotguns, we can do background checks on those, they're not as prevalent. And then rifles, just do a simple background check. I wish it were a little bit more nuanced, like background check from the dealer, because I don't believe in like second-hand background checks. But if you really want to get into the nuances of firearms, I believe that, okay, you purchase from a dealer. That dealer has to background check you. And if that dealer, and then once that background check goes through, like, you know, pretty much they have to keep a record of that sale to you. That way, say they trace that murder weapon back, like, the person could be held personally accountable if they were irresponsible with the gun in terms of how it left the original seller's hands. So, like, even if they didn't commit the murder, if they sold the gun, for example, to somebody who did, you can handle it at the liability level and not, you don't have to do, you know, the second-hand background checks. But I'm assuming this is all from a dealer, so background checks. Gambling, unrestricted, period. Sports betting. There's just no argument for anti-gambling laws. None at all. Period. It's just, like, the stuff attributed to gambling, you could literally attribute to about anything, and it just comes down to money. It's like, I don't think it's helpful. Homosexuality, I don't believe in civil unions, but I do believe in adoption, because the way I see it for adoption, you got to look at it from the perspective of the child. Like, yeah, you could say that you don't want the child to be influenced by a gay family in certain ways, but what's the alternative? An orphanage? It's like, no, like, just let the child, if there's a gay family that is financially secure, that they could demonstrate they're taking care of the child, absolutely. And then this is a tricky one, and I read this before. Transgender, same thing. Like, no unions, like marriage. Like, if you're gonna recognize marriage at all, it should be between a man and a woman. It shouldn't be between, you know, two other genders. But then again, it's like, I don't believe the government should be involved in marriage, period. And yes, you can get your reassignment surgery if you want it. That should be perfectly 100% legal. If that's what you want to pursue, that's your thing, not mine. Abortion, murder, except for the case of the mother's health. That's the only thing. Rape, birth defects, social, economic, and unrestricted. Nope. We are having none of that. We do not allow. And here's forced abortion. I'll show you. Children limit birth defects, ethnicity. Alt-righters are loving that one. I know that. I've been talking to them today too. Okay, so here's narcotics. Here's all the drug stuff. I believe a lot of these should be like pretty much almost no regulation for buying and selling. So here's unrestricted for most things, for even psychedelics, because those are, the danger of that's pretty overrated. You can't overdose in psychedelics, but it's even pretty hard. But we're gonna put age restricted on that. Alcohol, same thing, age restricted. And selling should be unrestricted, but if you sell to minors, then yeah, of course this should be. But in terms of like needing a license to sell, now stimulants is a little bit different, age restricted, but I am going to require a license for this, just because stimulants are extremely dangerous and you can overdose very easily on stimulants, so we're going to require a license. And there will be no restrictions on marijuana at all. Marijuana is almost harmless. The studies that show harm aren't because of the marijuana, but some of the injection methods, such as if you smoke it, you can get lung cancer, or like if you used it super chronically since like you were a child and you use it for like 30 years straight, they show like some neural impacts. Now that's going to be same thing, license required, because opiates, like stimulants, very high chance of an overdose, and you do want to have some control over opiates and their consumption. Okay, so here's euthanasia. I think we'll actually leave this right there, terminal disease. Although actually, I think I'm gonna leave this at chronic pain because yeah, that's gonna include all of these. Like passive euthanasia, I'm assuming means like you just let them die. Okay, so yeah, chronic pain or terminal diseases. Okay, so yeah, like if you're experiencing chronic pain, I wouldn't leave it at unrestricted. Like, you should have to give a good reason because, see, people, you know, and I don't think doctors are intentionally bad, but one thing that often happens, or that's been demonstrated to happen regarding euthanasia, is they'll sometimes push it on a family. I was watching a documentary about, like, this guy gets in a motorcycle accident. They hook him up to a machine, they keep him on life support, and they test him, and they say he's brain dead. The family thought they saw activity on the thing, so they get a second opinion from the same hospital. They say brain dead. And then they had to go to an independent outside of the hospital source because they're still, they're feeling like they're being pushed into unhooking their family member from the machine. The independent person comes in and they see, they say they see what the family said they saw was a small amount of activity, and they were going to unhook this guy. So you have to be very careful with what you allow physicians to do. And just to expand upon that a little bit more, like, no physician should ever be able to mention to the family about euthanasia. Like, euthanasia should only be discussed if it's brought up by the family. Like, you know, it almost should be criminal for them. But here we go. Obscenity, unrestricted. Get real and grow up. Ethnic hate speech, same thing. You're allowed to say whatever you want. I don't care. Corporate fraud, we'll leave it at fines. Blasphemy, unrestricted. Treason, jail time. You know, that's about right. Embezzlement, jail time. That's correct. Let's see, who cares? And then dissent, unrestricted. So there's law enforcement. And now we got sectors, and now this is where it gets interesting. This is probably going to put me right wing here, because this has, so first of all, public ownership down to 0. And already I'm leaning right wing. Told you what happened. But okay. Let's see, what we'll do is, you know, we're going to set our base here, because this is for all sectors right here. And we'll go through the individual ones, but we're going to set a base thing. Corporate tax, I believe, should be between 10 and 20%. 20% for the highest earning entities, and 10% for the lowest earning entities. Personal income tax, we're going Ronald Reagan here. We're gonna go with 29.5%. Consumption tax should be handled at the state level. We're not gonna do that. Tariffs, we're not gonna have any export tariffs, but we will have 37% import. 37.5% import tax. Okay, so now we're going to go through these individually, because there will be aspects of these that we do. First of all, education. We'll have a small amount of public ownership of this, about 5%. You know, let's provide some education for the disabled, veterans, etc. In fact, actually, I might even raise this to 10%. Yeah, we'll raise it to 10. States can handle the rest. And then, if you get a private education, we will subsidize you. We'll subsidize you about 5%. Media, I don't believe in public media. Finance, we've already got a public bank, so we're not doing finance. Healthcare, now this is one where I feel like you can have a small amount of public ownership. So again, we'll do 10% ownership, and we'll do 25% subsidies, which means, you know, we're going to provide for the poor, etc. So, you know, we'll do a little bit of that. Let's see, retail, we're not doing. Manufacturing, we're not gonna we'll do small subsidy for manufacturing. We'll do about 3%, just to encourage overall productivity without distorting the marketplace. Construction, we'll do about 5%, and we will have a few public construction companies in here, but nothing major. So we're at 5%. We're not going to have public ownership of agriculture, but we will give them 7.5% of a subsidy, just to keep the small family farms alive. You know, because it's like, having small farms, healthy small farms, is the backbone of a stable country, because the small family farm is what creates the stability. That's where Rome went wrong, is they pretty much killed off their small family farms. They got bought off by wealthy individuals. And then natural resources and real estate we're going to leave alone. If nothing else, because they do incur a small cost to society. Okay, so let's see where we are. And as you can see, if I can get those off. Okay, there we go, we got them. Alright. So let's collapse this. And see, this is where I'm at in general, right here. So, I am who I say I am, so let's look at where I am on the individual spectra. So first of all, of course, I am center-right. Pretty much every political spectrum I take puts me in this area. So about 47.53, 46.9, 53.1. And then I'm low spending 70.5 to 29.5, high spending. Privatization 74.1. Deregulation 59.8. Minarchism, oh no, yeah, deregulation 59.8. Minarchism 58.8. You know, as you can see, I'm kind of right there. And then liberal, as in the classical liberal, I'm 52.4. So I'm kind of centrist on the classical liberal versus the authoritarian. And then here's like 58.8 cosmopolitan. So as you can see, these are a lot of my left-wing values. Like, you know, I'm liberal in terms of personal freedoms, cosmopolitan, 58.8, meaning I'm pro-immigration. A modernist, you know, I'm for progress in the sense of modernizing as opposed to just doing stuff because it works. I believe in doing stuff because it's better, not because it works. And then, of course, left right here is 46.9, and these are all the opposites. And let's look at my GDP. My base GDP was 18,000. Hang on, what are sector sizes? Okay, this is an interesting one. I wonder if this will change anything. Okay, so here's my ideal sector sizes. I want private education to be really, really high. I wonder if this changes anything. No, it doesn't change anything about this, but like we'll leave that. So sector sizes, education. I would love for education to be about maybe 20%-ish. Media, I'd like small media to take over again, which would mean the overall size is smaller. Finance, you want a healthy finance to promote growth, but you don't want, what you don't want with finance is you don't want it to be too big to fail, I guess. Healthcare also needs to be pretty big. So let's see, so I'm kind of having trouble balancing this. I'm trying to think. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so there's 10 here. So here's how we'll do this. We'll have a multiplier. So I'd like education to be something like 15. I'd like media to be, I'd actually like it to be 3 or 4. I'll say 4.5. Well, I'll say 4 because, like I said, I'd rather have the small media, to be honest. Just because small media is like where you get your big news. Like there's a little bit of room for big media, but it's like I just don't think it's worth the hassle of it. I think it's gotten too bloated, I guess. Okay, so we'll go finance. Finance probably needs to be bigger than everything it's going to be funding, so we'll call that 20%. Healthcare, let's see if we can get by with 15. I'd also like healthcare to be kind of cheaper too. Retail, that could be about average. We don't need an abundance of retail, but it's nice to have. Manufacturing should be I'd say manufacturing probably about 15 too. Construction, ideally you'd want construction to be your second biggest. Okay, so construction you'd want to be 17.5. Agriculture, I'd say you could have it about 4, maybe 4.5. Natural resources, you can have say natural resources, you could have it about 7. And then real estate, you can have about like that right there. I don't know how this adds up, but yeah, so this would be my whole thing right here. Like you'd have your finance sector, which is big, but it's a healthy amount of big. And then in second place you'd have construction, because you want a lot of growth. That's the backbone of a great economy, is tons and tons of growth, and you have to have construction to have a lot of growth. And then third you'd have government, and then you'd have education, healthcare, and manufacturing. And then you'd have real estate, and then natural resources, and then agriculture and media. And even in media, under this 24 trillion, a little bit of a wet dream pie in the sky, but you're still getting 720 billion, so it's not like the media has nothing. So we're a confederal nation state and structure. We're a constitution, republic, monarchy. And then we're capitalism. And then our social system, we don't have a social system. And see, as you can see, it's like And I think this kind of says it all right here, like this whole design of the graph. Because it's like, here are my liberal values right here, or at least on the left right here. Like, I am a modernist, I'm cosmopolitan, and I'm for personal freedoms. But my values on the right are, I'm for deregulation, privatization, and low spending. So otherwise, small government, but yet compassionate to the people who matter. But anyhow, that's this, and I just want to do this because this is such a fascinating kind of simulator. We ended with the deficit perfect, actually, 4% of GDP. That's kind of where you'd want it. But anyhow, that's the video. Thank you guys for listening in. God bless.